My parents say they've known since I was a baby. They always tell me about this one time when I was less than a week old, and on a hotel bed, I literally rotated myself all on my own. I'd say I'd had a pretty normal childhood. I had two parents who were together. I went to preschool. I went to parks a lot. I took mommy and me classes. I did gymnastics. I loved watching TV, especially Little Einsteins. Nothing out of the ordinary. But the thing was, I couldn't sit still for the life of me. My parents always told me I was on the go, like there was a motor inside me that couldn't stop, and they weren't wrong. On the playground, I would always manage to climb on top of every piece of equipment, and I never stopped exploring. I was literally like a monkey. During classes, I couldn't sit still in circle time. I was the only kid running around. Adults could never capture my attention.
As you can see, Stephanie has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, better known as ADHD. Typically, children tend to be very active, and there's nothing wrong with that. Most young kids are not going to be able to focus for long periods of time, but if the inability to focus becomes drastic, a child might need intervention.
It wasn't anything that made me special. It literally just made things harder. Teachers would complain that I always ran around during class, and one preschool was literally so shocked that I tried to open a door on my own. You'd think a normal 3-year-old kid would be able to open a door, right? But,
Currently, we are very accepting of people who aren't neurotypical, but that wasn't always the case. Many people used to believe that ADHD was not an actual disorder, and they often assumed that it resulted from bad parenting or the kid being a troublemaker. While there is no concrete evidence of what causes ADHD, it appears to be a genetic disorder that cannot be prevented. According to recent statistics, about 7 to 11% of children have ADHD.
despite the fact that ADHD is actually pretty common, it didn't make me less of an outcast. I was a total enigma to people. I was a child that was super creative, intelligent, and social, yet at the same time, I had no behavioral skills, and I came across as rude and rowdy. It confused people how I could excel in certain areas, yet be totally inept in other ways. I had to move preschools 3 times because the teachers couldn't figure out how to teach me properly. I was the type who always wanted to make more friends and include everyone in what I did. I never let people be pushed to the side. And I always tried to do my best to do good in school and to just be a good person and be someone that other people looked up to. I genuinely thought I had a kind heart. Only 1 in 4 children with ADHD is female, so I think that made it even harder for me to be taken seriously by the few teachers who actually knew what the disorder was.
Although there are people out there who claim that ADHD is not real, there is scientific evidence that proves its legitimacy. According to an ADHD study done at Radboud University, the brains of people with ADHD never reach their full size. For instance, the amygdala and the hippocampus are significantly smaller in the brains of those with ADHD. Also, the frontal cortex and the visual processing area are linked differently, which means that people with ADHD process information differently. Furthermore, there is decreased blood flow to some of the frontal areas, which are responsible for decision-making and impulsivity. Finally, many studies have shown that ADHD brains have significantly less dopamine. How do we define ADHD? Well, there are 3 types. People with hyperactive ADHD often squirm in their seats, can't keep themselves still, and will run around and climb, especially as children. They usually feel restless and have trouble controlling what they say or do. For example, they may blurt out things and interrupt a lot. People with inattentive ADHD obviously have a hard time paying attention, but it's not because they don't want to, it's because they can't. People with inattention tend to miss certain details, have trouble with completing tasks in the workplace, and have problems with organization. They usually have messy work and terrible time management. The 3rd type is mixed, where a child exhibits all of the symptoms.
I have the mixed type, and I think the toughest part is that the hyperactivity and the inattention often build off of each other and make each other worse. But luckily, I got help early, and I've been supported for as long as I could remember. Usually, ADHD is diagnosed between the ages 6 and 12 because it's more apparent when it's in a school setting, but I was lucky enough to be diagnosed at 4.
Before one can diagnose ADHD, a lot of things need to be taken into consideration. You need to look at the history of symptoms, when the symptoms started, and where the symptoms are the worst: school, work, home, etc. It is important to rule out any other illnesses that could be causing the symptoms, as ADHD is often mistaken for other disorders. Questionnaires such as the Conners Parent and Teacher Rating Scale are given to teachers and parents. Also, there is a test called the CPT-3, also known as the Conners Continuous Performance Test, which is a computerized test that tests a person's ability to pay attention when faced with various stimuli. If a diagnosis is made, medication can be used to control the symptoms. There are two types of ADHD medication: stimulant medication and non-stimulant medication. Stimulant medications such as Ritalin and Adderall are more commonly used. Some examples of non-stimulant medication are antidepressants and blood pressure medications. Some of the more specific ones are Strattera, Capvey, and Intuniv.
The first medication I ever went on was a blood pressure medication, but it made me fall asleep the first time I ever took it during class, and you can imagine how my mom reacted to that. So obviously this wasn't an option, so I switched to Adderall soon after, and at age 13 I started taking Intuniv also, and when I was 14 I switched to Focalin, and recently I went off the Intuniv, so right now I'm just on the Focalin.
A child who is in school might also receive a special plan for accommodation, such as a 504 plan, Section 504 of the American Disabilities Act, or an IEP, which is an individual education plan. A 504 plan can provide a child with extra services such as extensions on projects or seating in the front of classrooms, and an IEP can not only provide a child with these services, but also alter the curriculum. For instance, a student may be allowed to have less math problems for homework. These plans are developed by school case managers, outside therapists, teachers, and parents. Additionally, a child with ADHD might also be assigned an aide to help them in class.
Throughout my childhood, I had an IEP, but it was switched to a 504 in middle school. Sadly, my teachers were not lenient about it in middle school, and they never really followed the accommodations that I was given. I always tended to argue against them. Thankfully, in high school, though, I was able to get my IEP back, and I was given some pretty nifty accommodations that the teachers actually took seriously. For example, if I need extra time on an assignment because I can't focus, I'm allowed to have it for up to 3 days, and the teacher is not allowed to take off any points. I'm really proud of myself because I actually haven't used any extensions my senior year yet, which means I'm on top of my work, so go me!
Finally, therapy is also very important. If a child has ADHD, it is helpful for them to meet with a specialist who can help them with their behavior.
As a child, I met with multiple specialists who would help me with my behavior. For example, I used to meet with a woman who was an ABA who would help me with creating positive behaviors and positive social interactions. One thing she would do with me is that we would create mock situations in which I had to figure out how to act. I would be asked questions like, what would you do if another student knocked over your block tower? And questions like these would help me train myself to keep my cool and make good decisions socially. Talk therapy is also really helpful for people with ADHD. If a person can pinpoint what's bothering them and ticking them off, it really helps them cope. As a child, I really don't have the best memories, so I don't really want to know how I would be if I wasn't being treated for ADHD. I remember in kindergarten, we had a rating system of how good a kid behaved every day by moving a clothespin on this little circular board. In first grade, we had a sticker system where every time we behaved, we got a sticker. Every day, I would go into the school with the mindset that today is going to be a good day, and I'm going to keep my clothespin on the good rating, and I'm going to get all the stickers in the class. I was always striving to do better, and I always tried to have a day where I did my best. It never happened. I was always the one with the clothespin in the gets a call home section, and I was always the kid with the least stickers, and it really hurt my confidence.
School happens to be one of the biggest stressors for students with ADHD. Imagine being in an environment where it seems like the entire world is working against you. Every day, you're forced to do tasks that your brain and body cannot enable you to do. It's frustrating and embarrassing.
Other kids noticed that I was different, and I noticed I was different. It was embarrassing how often I had to go down to the principal's office for not behaving. And it was terrible that children would purposely rile me up, knowing I wouldn't be able to respond properly and calmly. And it was the worst that people managed to get a rise out of this, that my peers managed to get a rise out of this. It was difficult that kids were either scared of me or didn't want to go near me, and I hated that they thought I was a bully. A lot of teachers didn't even understand either, and I wasn't given a lot of leeway. I was always blamed as being the bad one whenever something happened between me and another classmate. In kindergarten, whenever I acted out the most, I was held still in a small, closet-sized room. They thought this was helping me at the time, but it wasn't. Looking back, it was borderline abusive. And thankfully, as soon as the principal found out about this, she intervened. But I'm not going to blame the school for this. I'm just going to blame the lack of education about ADHD. Another memory that really hurts me is the fact that I lost my special privileges as a hall monitor in front of a big portion of my grade at the time because someone purposely got me in trouble. They knew I would get upset, and they knew I took the job seriously, so they threw chicken nuggets at me and chased me around the hall, ran into the classroom, and when I screamed at them to stop and gently touched their wrist to try and rein them in a little bit, they threw a fit, fell to the ground, started crying, and made it look like I had beaten them up, essentially. And who was the teacher going to believe? The girl who was crying on the floor? Or me, the biggest troublemaker of the grade? It's not that these teachers wanted to make my experience bad. I think most of them were great people and cared about me, but not many people understood the disorder as much as they do today.
The actions of these children can be considered as bullying, and the actions of these teachers were absolutely inappropriate. No child deserves to be ostracized for bad behavior, especially if they have a disorder such as ADHD. As a teacher, you should want to help all of your students succeed. Attending to the needs of an ADHD child should not be seen as special treatment, but rather as leveling the playing field. Here are some examples. In grade school, a teacher might want to keep all their students seated alphabetically, but if an ADHD child is sitting in the back, moving them to the front could help them stay engaged and learn better. Instead of having a reward system for a class that leaves an ADHD kid behind in terms of wins, let them have their own special reward system that works for them. If a normal student gets a sticker on their card for sitting all day, then give an ADHD student a sticker for sitting still for half of the day. This reward system will not only raise an ADHD child's self-esteem, but also make them feel more included in the classroom. And as for keeping a child still, don't contain them to one area. Let them walk around and let their energy out.
In middle school, it only got worse. I went from having nice teachers who cared about me to many who didn't understand and who didn't want to connect with me or even try and care. I can't tell you how many times I've cried during class because teachers thought it was beneficial to point out the fact that I wasn't like other students, or emphasize how rude it was that I couldn't be engaged like everyone else. I can't tell you how many times another student has asked me what's wrong with me, why I can't just stop being the way I am, why I'm trying to upset everyone, why I'm ruining things for them. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about ADHD is the fact that it only really hurts you in school. It doesn't. It affects you in every way possible. Everywhere. People thought it was weird that I blurted out random things or acted impulsively. They thought it was weird that sometimes I would jump around, that I was always wiggling, and it annoyed them. They thought I was obnoxious for interrupting conversations, and they thought I was rude because it never appeared like I was paying attention to them. They thought I was purposely forgetting information just to bother them, and that I was trying to be unreliable. They thought I was trying to be funny in class and get a rise out of the teacher by misbehaving. Not many people liked me. Everyone thought I was weird, so I was teased a lot. It was so bad that I was eventually diagnosed with anxiety and depression on top of ADHD. I could never open up to teachers or guidance counselors about my issues. Because of my disorder, I just was never taken seriously. It always seemed like every adult I trusted in that building thought that I was the one who instigated every situation. I spent more time crying in the bathroom and skipping school than actually learning. I had no one who understood in the building.
Although I do not have a degree in psychology or education, I do have common knowledge, and I have done my research. I know that a teacher should encourage their students rather than humiliate them. It is their job to pay attention to how kids treat each other and intervene if they witness unacceptable behavior, especially in middle school. I'm not a superintendent, but I would make sure my school system has people who are capable of handling children with different disorders. Yes, it is not easy to teach a student with ADHD, but it is your responsibility to communicate with students and make sure that everything is running smoothly. To help engage a student with ADHD, teach in a way that's interesting to them. Figure out what they like and go from there. If they like music, encourage them to come up with a song to memorize their vocab words. Also, make sure to mix it up a little so that they do not lose interest. Check in on them to make sure you understand where they're at. Ask them how they are doing, what they are enjoying, and what they are having trouble with. Like I said, communication is key because ADHD students can easily get distracted and miss certain details. And finally, make sure you give them clear expectations of what you want. If you and the student are on the same page, everything will be so much easier. If there is anything that can help them stay on track, like a schedule, that can also make things much easier.
You know when you're driving with a friend who's just such a reckless driver and you're terrified out of your mind? Imagine they suddenly sped up to like 90 miles per hour and they roll down the windows. As loud as you scream, they won't slow down because the wind's just blowing and you can't hear anything. Your ears are just fogged up. You constantly feel like you're about to crash and you can't do anything about it. That's what ADHD feels like, except suddenly you're the one in the driver's seat and oh look, a butterfly! In simpler terms, you're a car with no gas and no brakes. You have no control over anything. It's scary not having a grip. What is that people with ADHD are more than aware of what's happening. They're not clueless to their actions. They realize everything they do, and it's embarrassing. But they can't control it. They can't at all. And when they do manage to get a partial grip on their life, they're using up every ounce of their energy through the day, and they have nothing left for anything else. Going to high school was a terrifying experience. By the time I was 14, my ADHD was pretty manageable, and I didn't slip up in class as often as I used to. But I was expecting everything to be a lot harder than what I already faced still. I was shy to tell my teachers about my issues, and I was scared to take high classes. I was recommended for all honors based on placement scorings, but I started out in CP classes, and then even so, I pushed myself down to collaborative classes, which offered more support to students who struggled in said subjects. I literally had no faith that I could do anything, which is really sad looking back. What I didn't expect, though, was the amazing amount of support that I was given. All of a sudden, I had teachers who cared about getting to know me and wanted to help me succeed. Every time I fell behind, instead of being ridiculed, my teachers would take initiative to help me. They would help me pick myself back up. If I was losing focus in class, my teachers would now usually tap my desk and whisper, "Hey Steph, are you still with us?" instead of screaming at me in front of the entire class. And if I was behind on work, I would now be able to tell my teachers, and they would help me make a schedule for myself. Midway through my freshman year, I was able to get an IEP again, which gave me access to a counselor and a psychologist when I needed it, if I was having trouble with my work. At the start of high school, I was also assigned to an amazing guidance counselor who cared a lot about me, and he was shocked by a lot of the things I had gone through. And my sophomore year, the school had the wellness center open, which gives me access to therapy as needed. It really upsets me that some people don't appreciate the faculty at their school. Mine really changed my life once I got to high school.
It takes a team of people to tackle ADHD. It is in no way the person's fault, but it does take a toll on the people around them. It is especially hard for families, as it can really put a strain on the relationship between a parent and a child. No parent wants to feel like they failed their child, and no child wants to feel like an inconvenience for their parent. Having a kid with ADHD means devoting a lot of time to keeping them out of trouble. It means a lot of stuff will break, and a lot of incidents will happen. It means getting calls from teachers saying that something happened in school that day. It means that sometimes others won't understand and will assume that they know better than you. A lot of money goes into keeping a child with ADHD healthy both physically and mentally. As an ADHD parent, it is important to be involved in your child's life. It's in their best interest. You have to be super patient. As hard as it might be to not punish them or constantly yell at them, you have to remember that their best behavior may be different from another's best behavior. Encourage them to do their best and don't punish them for behaviors that you want to see. Put a positive spin on your words when talking to your child. Instead of saying, "You're finally doing your homework, took you long enough," say, "Yay, I'm glad that you were able to start your work." If someone in your life has ADHD, there are a lot of things you can do to help. The most helpful thing to do is to keep your cool around them. If they cut you off during a conversation, gently ask them if you can finish your story first. If you're working on a school project with a friend who has ADHD, be flexible with what work style works best for them. If you notice them spacing out in class, give them a little nudge and make sure they're keeping track of what's going on.
What I want everyone to know about ADHD is that we can't control it, and while it's not an excuse for our actions, it does explain them a lot. I also want people to know, just because you can't focus sometimes or jiggle your leg in class, it doesn't mean you have ADHD. If you get nervous before tests, it doesn't mean you have an anxiety disorder. If your stomach hurts after eating too much ice cream one day, you're not lactose intolerant. If you like things to be clean, you don't have OCD, and if you run really fast and end up breathing heavily, it doesn't mean you have asthma. Suffering sometimes does not mean you have an entire disorder. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go for a diagnosis if you really think something is seriously wrong, though. If you're truly struggling, then it's really important to make sure you see what's happening. But that doesn't give you an excuse to belittle people who are suffering. Constantly saying that you think you have ADHD because you can't focus in a boring class can often make too light of the actual disorder, and people will think they're exaggerating their actual symptoms. Also, you shouldn't refer to ADHD folks getting assistance as special treatment. For example, when I took the SAT, I was given extra time to finish. A lot of people complain that this wasn't fair or that it was cheating. But the thing is, when I take the test, I'm already at a disadvantage. With how much I get distracted, I can sometimes only do half the problems in the time it takes others to do all of them. If a group of people are in a car accident and most of them just need a few band-aids, but one has a broken arm, you're not going to give the one with a broken arm a few band-aids and call it a day. Finally, people with ADHD are not stupid. It has absolutely no correlation with academic intelligence. Although we don't appear to be the most socially skilled, it doesn't mean we're any less otherwise. I find a lot of times, people either don't take me seriously because of my ADHD, or vice versa, say I'm smart, so I must be lying, or it's not as bad as I'm saying it is. The thing is, while I might be able to understand material in class really well and grasp it quickly, I have trouble getting my work done or staying focused in class. My grades do not reflect how much effort I put in. The point of what I said in this video wasn't for anyone to pity me. It's for people to understand. Nobody deserves to go through their childhood or any point in their life feeling like they're less than everyone else. Every person, no matter what they're going through, deserves to get what they need. Although you can't get rid of ADHD, there's ways to handle it efficiently. I'm not going to lie and say there aren't times in which my friends or parents get annoyed by how bouncy I am late at night when my medicine wears off, or that sometimes I'm so fidgety that I contort myself into super weird positions while working, to the point where I can't even focus. I'll be honest, as I watch these recordings back while putting this video together, I'm slightly bothered by my voice, how emotive and fast it is compared to a neurotypical person. I'm aware of it. But all of this is bearable. Day by day, I figure out more about myself, and I figure out how to make things work. If you're suffering from ADHD, I want you to know that eventually it will get better. Eventually, you will reach your goals. I hope that my story was educational for everyone, and hopefully it changed the way that you look at the disorder.